By the way, Muhammad is actually my first name. Mod is a short form, Muhammad Najib. Very good morning to all of you. Excellency, Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Great to see you again, Madam. Mr. Jose Concepcion, Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Chairman, ASEAN Business Advisory Council, Excellencies, ASEAN Business Council members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be with you this morning. And let me first of all thank the organizers for inviting me to deliver this keynote address. Allow me also to congratulate the Philippines government and the ASEAN Business Advisory Council for choosing an opposite theme for today's summit, prosperity for all. For this was indeed the foundation of ASEAN when it was established 50 years ago, prosperity for the peace and stability for the region. And indeed, in those 50 years, we have made great strides. Between 1975 and 2014, for instance, the ASEAN economy multiplied 28 times, from $87.2 billion to $2.5 trillion. By November 2015, when during Malaysia's chairing of ASEAN, we signed the Kuala Lumpur Declaration on the establishment of the ASEAN community. We were looking at an ASEAN economy close to $2.7 trillion, the seventh largest in the world. And recent estimates suggest that taken as one, ASEAN would now represent the sixth largest economy in the world. Peace has become even more the norm in the region. There has been no conflict between the ASEAN 5 countries. And since the end of the Vietnam War in 1975, after negotiating civil war in Cambodia, as well as the hostilities between Vietnam and China in 1979, ASEAN has been successful in bringing the states of Indochina and Myanmar into the regional family of nations. This was a very important step. The harmony between Southeast Asian nations has allowed for resources to be focused on bringing economic benefit to our peoples, consolidating regional stability, and keeping true to the vision of our founding fathers. We have achieved a critical mass to take us forward. Our economies are growing faster than most of the rest of the world, and it is expected that by 2050, the ASEAN economy will amount to over $9.2 trillion, making it the fourth largest in the world. Again, there are other predictions that are even more optimistic, suggesting ASEAN could reach the number 4 position by 2030, a mere 13 years from now. These are big numbers. These are impressive positions, but we have yet to achieve them. The big challenge is to ensure that the integration of our individual economies that is necessary for ASEAN itself to become a significant world market is driven through. On that, we still have a long way to go. We have to bring down further the trade tariffs that still exist. WTO figures show average tariffs in ASEAN were around 4% in 2015 the work to bring them down to zero or almost zero must be pursued vigorously. Next, we must work to facilitate intra-ASEAN trade further. To achieve the $9.2 trillion figure by 2050, there has to be a 20% reduction in fixed trade cost. We need to work towards facilitative measures such as a national single window seamlessly linked to the ASEAN single window and standardized custom procedures. Most of all, non-tariff barriers and measures, or NTBs and NTMs, must be reduced and ultimately removed. This is a nagging, a somewhat stubborn worldwide problem, but it is in ASEAN's own interest to lead the way in this endeavor. Here, there is really a lot to do. Between 2000 and 2015, would you believe it, non-tariff barriers and measures in ASEAN actually rose from 1,634 measures to 5,975. This cannot be tolerated. It has to be checked. It has to be reversed. For ASEAN to reach that target economic total of $9.2 trillion economy, NTBs and NTMs have to be reduced by at least 50%. There is no alternative if we wish to be able to seize that prize. So huge coordinated efforts are required to deal with this problem. Ladies and gentlemen, why is it that economic growth and the size of economies are so important? It is because only if you have a growing economy, then you can distribute prosperity. You can distribute wealth. We want this prosperity to be shared by all. Without economic success, we know nothing can be shared. We've had years of very strong growth in ASEAN. In the case of Malaysia, our gross national income has increased by nearly 50% since we began our economic transformation program in 2010, when I took over in 2009. So 2010, we started our economic transformation program. Our focus has been on ensuring that growth is both sustainable, inclusive, and if possible, equitable, or more equitable. For we want no Malaysian, wherever they may be, even in the long houses, Sabah and Sarawak, not to be left behind, regardless of ethnicity, faith, and community. We've been successful. 1.8 million new jobs, 1.8 million new jobs were created between 2010 to 2016, which means individuals and their families benefit from being in work and sharing our country's prosperity. We have virtually eliminated poverty, reducing its incidence to just 0.6%. Ladies and gentlemen, we do not want our citizens to be marginalized. In the age of extremism and radicalization, there is a practical reason for that. We know that those who see no hope in their own societies are more prone to the siren calls of terrorists who can exploit their vulnerability and lure them with their lies and giving them a false sense of purpose and achievement. One of the lessons of the rise of extremist pluralism in Europe too is that a neglected underclass, or those who felt left behind by economic growth, prosperity, and the benefits of globalization, can overturn elections and political systems. We have put in place many programs to encourage training, entrepreneurship among communities. I believe in that, creating more young entrepreneurs, particularly in rural and disadvantaged areas. Female participation in the labor force, or even working at home. We have this program, how to get women to be more productive, even working at home, and learning the skills needed to succeed in the innovation economies of today and tomorrow. And I'm glad to say that our government-linked companies have been doing admirable work to support the government's stress on sustainable, inclusive, and equitable growth, not just part of the corporate and social responsibility, but also it makes sound business sense. For example, giving them internship for young graduates to make them more marketable is a special program that I have really pushed hard, and it has produced results. At the same time, we recognize that some of our fellow citizens need extra assistance to ensure that they can live in dignity and provide properly for their families. So we provide direct cash benefits called BRIM, but that has a strong economic basis for that because it creates multiplier effect which further boosts the overall economy by switching resources from indirect subsidy, subsidizing petrol, diesel, for example, and shifting it to direct cash assistance to needy families actually works and is popular in Malaysia. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm aware that in the Philippines, the government is giving special attention to the need to bring prosperity to all segments of the society. I've been told of the work of the Go Negosyo to socialize economic growth, and I applaud that. And I'm also glad that this year, ASEAN BAC is launching the new ASEAN Mentorship for Entrepreneurs Network, or AMEN, which aims to enable micro, small, medium-sized enterprises by having big companies expose them to greater opportunities and to better management methods, and to help them towards sustainable growth by linking them to regional and global supply chains. These MSMEs employ anywhere between 59 to 97% of the workforce in different ASEAN countries. They are the backbone of our economies, comprising more than 90% of all ASEAN companies. And in fact, in the case of Malaysia, 97% of our businesses are in the MSME sector. They contribute 36% of our GDP last year, 65% of total employment, and 18% of our exports. To ensure the systematic development of MSMEs in Malaysia, the National SME Development Council was established in 2004 to effectively handle SME-related issues. In 2012, the SME Master Plan 2012-2020 was launched, while the SME development programs have been further strengthened in the 11th Malaysia Plan towards our goal of achieving a high-income status nation by 2020. The focus in the current 11th Malaysia Plan is on productivity, innovation, entrepreneurship, and inclusiveness. Growth through productivity is something which we need to pay a lot of emphasis on. In the case of Malaysia, I have to confess we've not achieved our targets yet. So in the coming months and years, we will pay a lot of attention on how to increase productivity. Some of the results we can see, for example, the performance of SMEs, they have been growing at the annual growth rate of 7.1%, higher than the overall growth rate for the economy of 4.2% in 2016. We are taking further steps to boost this sector by declaring 2017 as the Startup and SME Promotion Year, and we have allocated sums of money to provide incentives and programs to support this thriving and vital part of our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, micro, small, and medium enterprises are at the heart of this summit today. And in this regard, I am heartened by the signing earlier this month in Tokyo of the ASEAN-Japan Innovation Network, ASEAN, by the ASEAN Business Advisory Council and the ASEAN Business Club with major Japanese business organizations. I hope this framework of cooperation and others like it will bring to the use of technology those on the periphery of economic prosperity to its mainstream. There is great need to expand e-commerce in ASEAN, particularly amongst MSMEs, whose sales will benefit immensely from the exponential growth it can offer. On retail sales alone, the average percentage of e-commerce transactions in ASEAN countries is only just over 1% of the total, compared to over 10% in the developed economies. This underlines the huge potential for growth in e-commerce, and initiatives such as ASEAN and the recently announced Digital Free Trade Zone that Jack Ma of Alibaba and I recently announced in Kuala Lumpur should encourage all in ASEAN to build this vibrant sector of our economies. I also welcome the establishment of the ASEAN E-Commerce Coordinating Committee towards enhancing e-commerce activities in the region. The current internet user base in ASEAN of 260 million people is expected to grow to 480 million users by 2020, making ASEAN the world's fastest growing internet region. Some studies show that the ASEAN e-commerce economy is expected to grow to $200 billion by 2025. We must deploy digital technology, this powerful force of economic innovation, to help us make the leap into that great future that ASEAN promises and ensure that it is one of prosperity for all. Ladies and gentlemen, another challenge that ASEAN faces, and we should bear in mind, particularly in this 50th anniversary year, is the need both to raise awareness of ASEAN and to make it feel real, relevant, and tangible to all our citizens. We are one of the most successful regional associations in the world, and while some have criticized us for moving too slowly, we have avoided the downsides of moving too fast. The turmoil in the European Union and the strong swells of anti-EU opinion in many countries on that continent demonstrates the dangers of Europe-wide institutions not having sufficiently won the support and affection of member state populations. At the same time, however, there is a large body of EU citizens who think of themselves as exactly that, as citizens of the European Union. I'm not saying that ASEAN countries want to go that far, but to what extent? To what extent do our peoples think of themselves as being members of ASEAN? For our community to be real, it must be something that is part of people's lives. It must be something that touches their hearts. ASEAN must be seen as a source of cohesion, solidarity, support, unity, friendship, strength, and of course, greater prosperity. In many ways, ASEAN has been exactly that. But the bonds between our countries and our peoples need to be more evident for our citizens to feel that is what our association is all about. As we celebrate a half-century of ASEAN, what better way for us to do so than working towards the theme of this summit, prosperity for all, and turning that into reality. That really would be an ASEAN that feels meaningful to all our citizens. And I encourage all present here today, not just to make the most of your discussions at this summit, but to bring those ideas, the spirit of togetherness, home with you. Then we can begin to make the next 50 years of ASEAN a fulfillment of that sense of promise that our first 5 decades have led us to. I wish you all a very productive and enjoyable summit. Thank you.